First of all, to all investors out there, I think it's really important to provide more than just capital down the road. I think we all need to use our expertise and be available to companies and reply and be active. To all entrepreneurs, especially if you're building great products, be wise in sort of how you choose your capital and who you choose your capital from, because it is a very long-term relationship. And I've seen a lot of challenges where incentives, where expectations weren't aligned. And you need to find the investor which is, obviously helpful, but at the same time, more importantly, understands your thought processes and goals. Because as soon as money involved, there are a lot of cases that people get greedy, incentives are not aligned, and then this can also break the business, even though the business in itself would go well. In the blockchain space, anyone who is out there building interesting products, more than happy to have a chat, even if it's not for investment, for advice, or maybe we can make introductions to other funds if it doesn't fit our needs properly. And always happy to just also have a normal conversation and just making friends, connections, and so on and so forth.
Can you just introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about Blockchain Founders Fund?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chad, for having me. So, more than happy to introduce myself and happy to be here and sort of, explain a little bit more what we're doing and bring hopefully some insights. So we run Blockchain Founders Fund, which is an early stage venture capital fund focusing purely on the blockchain and crypto space. And we started about 4 years ago with the first fund. We made about 50 plus investments all around the world in very asset light software businesses. And they all should use blockchain as sort of the core of their technology to solve a certain problem. And the idea is that we are not only providing capital, but we also provide, really the whole team support and, community and perks and stuff to our companies, which then, should help them grow or should help fix challenges along the way. In addition to capital. And this has been working quite well. We now almost at 100 portfolio companies, across 5 continents. The predominant, sort of part is still the US and Southeast Asia. And then in December last year, we started a new fund, sort of Fund 2, which is 75 million US. It's still not too big, but it's because we want to stay at the really early stage space, right? So if your fund grows beyond a certain size, it's very difficult to deploy small tickets, right, from a fund economics perspective. And we like to do sort of anything up to 200K on the first ticket and then get to know the company, work with them, and then do larger follow-on investments to make sure they are capitalized over the coming months and years. And we have a very strong LP base, which was great because we're very transparent sort of how we operate and want them to co-invest and want them to add value to our companies. And we had some really interesting success over the first fund, especially just because it's longer, where we invested in a company called Splinterlands, which is now the largest blockchain game in the world. But also Luna Crush, which is quite exciting right now, which is an analytics company which helps you with social sentiment, for example, on different points. So the space is quite broad we're looking at, but it's a very thesis-driven approach across sort of how we think the blockchain space will evolve. And that's kind of like Blockchain Founders Fund in a nutshell. We can dive deeper into any other parts when you think it's relevant.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. And especially your success with Splinterlands. I mean, those guys are at the top of the food chain in the P2E space, and it's really exciting to see, how they'll evolve from there. That space entirely is very interesting, I'm sure, to lots of gamers and investors around the world. I actually wanted to touch base on you about how you select these process, because these projects, because you mentioned, a certain thesis that you guys follow. But as you know, the most of the projects that you invest in, they're very early stage, so they have no financials, they have no quote unquote proven record of success. So how do you choose between the great projects and the projects that you choose to pass over?
That's a very good question. And like you said, the projects are really, really early, right? So we're talking pre-seed to seed stage, typically. Anything below a $20 million valuation typically ranges between a 5 to a 12, right? That's sort of typically where we come in, which is the first institutional check-in, or one of the first. And of course, you don't have, a financial history most of the time, right? They're most of the time pre-revenue. They're kind of in the product building process, or might have an MVP ready you can look at. But definitely you cannot really do the traditional sort of financial driven due diligence, right? Just because it's a very different stage. But on the other side, we do still have a 90-step checklist for all of our companies. Because even if we are not able to, for example, analyze a financial model, or if you're not really able to work with a financial history, it's still important to look at the financials the founder is projecting, right? Because it gives us a good understanding if he understands the market, if he understands his business, and if he has or she actually put thought into this process, right? So we still look at all of this, but it's definitely not the core of our analysis. What the core of our analysis is around the founders, right? So we look for serial entrepreneurs, people who have a very strong domain expertise in what they're trying to build, right? For example, if you want to build a solution in the fintech world, we're now working with banks or things like this, then we would expect the founders to have a banking background, one of the leading corporations, just to make sure that he has the network and the understanding and expertise. If they're doing a gaming company, then we might want to look at, okay, does he or she have a gaming background, right? Or have they been gamers themselves, right? Kind of like that gives us a lot more confidence that they can potentially execute it. Another thing, which is especially in sort of bearish markets important for us, is to figure out, even including background checks to the founders, if they are really in for the long game, right? And if they're passionate and driven by the company idea itself, and not just by the potential exit reward or money grab, right? Because in bear markets, it might take slightly longer to raise, right? It might be more challenging because not everything is sparkly and gloomy in the market. So you have to have someone who is really convinced that this is going to be the next solution, which has changed people's life, right? So we spend a lot of time with founders on calls and really understand their motivation and their vision and why they're doing this. And then on every larger investments, we also do professional background checks to make sure that they don't have a scammer history, or like they're really claiming what they have. They've worked at those positions, just to make sure that the founder is legit in the end. The second part we look at very carefully is market, right? We do our own market projections. We figure out if the market is large enough, right, to get engaged and involved. And the third part is the product. Well, what we see right now in the investor space, especially blockchain and crypto, because it's just newer and a lot of hype investing going on as well, is that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to the product, right? I'll give you an example. In gaming, a lot of these blockchain play to earn games, they don't really have a game yet, right? Because they underestimate that actually developing a solid game takes time, right? It is a sophisticated process. Even the big game studios of the world, like Ubisoft, EA, they take years to build the best games, right? Just because there's a lot of complexity going in. Now, what's happening in the blockchain space is that, it's driven by startups right now, not by gaming studios. And then they would even take longer to build a game like this. And then they're currently raising and getting hype based on community and NFT drops, right? But if the game is going to be released in 4 to 5 years, it's very difficult to sustain a community over 5 years, right? And still having them excited. And especially then if you're investing in tokens on gaming, the question is really, is that game ever going to be released? Is it meeting expectations, or is it going to be a disappointment for the community, or will there even be a community moving forward? Right. So we're very much driven on product first, and invest in companies with great products, because community we can help them build, right? But building products is harder to teach and harder to assess down the road. So I think these are the core things for us we look at, of course, with many other points as well, but like, as the key points for early stage investing in that space, that has been proven for us to be the most important factors to look at.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm sure it's a complex process, and you have to do your due diligence. You noted there, though, a couple of risks within the blockchain space, like people moving into it for a cash grab, people not focusing really on the product, people making promises that they'll do something, but not having really the resources to maintain a community for that long. So there seems to be a lot of risk. Of course, it's also an early stage. You invest in early stage, so it's usually higher risk in that area. Why have you guys chosen blockchain, given there are so many risks present, and why blockchain early stage companies as opposed to more established ones?
Yeah, very good question. So, I mean, all of us sort of across the team has a passion for the technology, right? And not so much from the whole token side of view. It's more like, okay, what blockchain in itself can do for the world, essentially, right? I mean, and on the fund one, we have done a lot of investments in the non-crypto space, right? We looked at supply chain tech, and then obviously blockchain was a very interesting player. We even looked at auditing firms for streaming services, right? So the music tech, to make sure rewards and royalties are paid out successfully, right? So there's a bunch of stuff where blockchain just has a better use case than other technologies, and where we think it is just super exciting to solve these issues in the market. But beyond that, of course, that whole crypto part sort of introduced a new, very interesting layer where we can move away from traditional systems and middlemen towards incentivizing the right people, such as communities, creators, all these important players. And as we've been in blockchain for quite a while now, most of the team between sort of 2016 to 2018, we've seen sort of the whole thing and also seen all the challenges with it, right? Or at least most of them. And we were thinking that with our approach, we can go against it and kind of, give blockchain what it's supposed to do. And, we're trying to be more transparent, be more active in the space to kind of go against the whole, scam, money grab sort of situation, and want to bring a lot more legitimacy into the market. And that's kind of, I think, why we ended up, deciding on to go full on blockchain, right? Because it's just such an exciting technology and can be used in so many different angles and parts of the technology space and beyond. And early stage for us, if you look at our profiles, like most of the people on our team have either had companies before, like startups, or have even exited startups, right? So we have a decent understanding of what it takes to be a founder and what we can do in order to support the founder's journey. And in the early days, first of all, it's really exciting to building teams, but then also our whole approach was we want to work with the company, right? And if we invest super late, I would say Series B beyond or pre-IPO, there's not so much you want to still or can still support the company, right? Because it's a full-blown organization, and they just hire someone if they need to, or they, of course, not always that easy, but you get the idea. On the early stages, we can use our network, our expertise to help the company, move faster, move more efficient, avoid pitfalls, and just reach that Series B stage, hopefully earlier and more effective. And that's why we've built sort of ScaleX, what you see in my background, which is kind of our approach or like our commitment to be a very hands-on VC. So that's how we talk to our companies typically every single week over a 6 to 12 month period. We build a very, sophisticated environment and community around it. And then, of course, we do follow-on investments, right? Up to $5 million into the companies we already know, understand, and are very excited about. And yeah, the early stage investment is just in our opinion, where we can add the most value. We have the most expertise because all of us had early stage companies and raised a couple of early rounds. So we were just wanted to focus on what makes sense for us as a team.
Yeah, I love that. I love the personalness in the whole endeavor you have over there, and really that's when startups I think most need the VCs, right? To come and scoop when the risk is highest, and not just to give money, but to, like you said, offer some guidance and structure and whatnot. So that's really awesome. I know you guys have attended Agora's ninth Global Blockchain Congress. You got to see a lot of those early stage startups over there, I'm sure. What did you think of the startup ecosystem in the region, in the UAE, and the projects themselves?
Yeah, so we across the team, we actually came to Dubai for I think 3.5 months, right? So we like to go and explore the markets and actually be part of it, rather than just like talking to some players over Zoom and read a couple of market reports. So the philosophy has always been, why don't we go to the market for a couple of months and actually understand it, talk to players, get to know the investor side, but also the project side. So that's what we did in end of December last year until I think mid of March or something like this. We were in the UAE. We were 3 times in Saudi Arabia. I was in Oman as well. So really tried to explore the ecosystem. We joined Leap in Saudi, Agoda in Dubai, and a bunch of other conferences as well. We now also have investors into our fund out of the region to open up deal flow and open up sort of the connection side within the region. And we've been in very close conversations with companies, other VCs or accelerators. And what we have seen now is that I would say that the ecosystem is exciting because a lot of projects come here because capital is parked in the region, right? There's a lot of family offices, there's investors, there's, a lot of people with a lot of money. So I understand that, projects come to Dubai and that all the events are happening in Dubai just because it is a good and forward-thinking ecosystem, also mostly driven through good governance, right? And, young people with the tech-savvy adoption. However, we haven't seen a lot of really Dubai native projects, right? I mean, there's a lot of people coming in and setting up a business, but they're not actually Emiratis, right? Or Saudis or things like this. So I think there's a lot of potential in the region. I think it's early, and but what is positive is a very forward-thinking government. I think the regulations are catching up in the UAE as well. There's a lot of capital, so I think all the main perspectives of what venture capital and blockchain needs is there. Now it's just about, okay, the people needed to get excited as well and start building their own companies in the region and really bring true innovation out of the region. In Saudi, for example, it was also quite interesting to see. I talked to the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, and they were running hackathons for blockchain. And they had I forgot the number, but it was probably more than 1,000 signups or something. And then they had 80 plus MVPs ready at the end of the hackathon, all in blockchain, right? So it was one of the most sought after category in the technology space. So it is coming. I think give the region probably another year, and then we will see a very interesting blockchain landscape.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, like you said, I've been around these, and I got to see, a lot of different projects and the investment community. It's really bustling over there, and yeah, I think I've spoken to a couple of people who are very integrated into the blockchain space. They all seem to agree on the idea that we need the region is just at the tipping point of where we can where everyone is educated enough to literally know a little bit more about what they're doing. Because I remember when the blockchain movements first started out, it was like ICOs and what's an ICO and trying to explain to an investor how you should buy this coin. that gives you no equity in a company, and and it's only digital, and now the whole industry is transformed into, so much more than that, and everyone's a lot more informed. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where the ecosystem is going to end up as well. And yeah, on that same note, if you had to bet on one of the blockchain's many use cases, you've mentioned a lot of them already: fintech, P2E, supply chain. What do you think will become the most mainstream in the next like 5 to 10 years, say?
I mean, I do think that you probably have a blockchain development on many different areas, which is driven sort of interoperable and like because of each other. I don't think that there's like only one will emerge. Um, I think that gaming is something which is exciting. I don't think it's happening in the current sort of play to earn world, that it's actually becoming sort of like a job, but it's more about figuring out how can we incentivize the gaming ecosystem using blockchain, right? If that's then happening, in the current form of guild and, the pure play to earn side, or if it's more like a bit more conservative approach of like just incentivizing the user or the gamer a lot more. That's I think the latter, but like we will see. And I do think that DeFi will still be on the forefront of adoption, right? Especially as we see now a lot more companies getting into the space, trying to make the sort of the operating system, let's say, a lot more convenient, because right now it's still very complicated to get started, right? You really need to spend a significant amount of time of understanding how the different platforms, how the mechanics essentially behind it works, right? But we are just invested in a company. We're just kind of going against that, right? And they want to really figure out, okay, how can we make this easy, right? A better front end, a better UI, UX, easier steps, because there's so many basics are still missing in all these, sort of blockchain tools. And that's, I think, what makes it super difficult for the normal person, essentially, which is not crypto native or hasn't been in crypto for that long, to get comfortable and see this as something which is changing. But I think everybody who uses it once, right, and then kind of sees the benefit, understands it, but like get people to that point that they use it is still a challenge on a grand scale, right? So once we figure out how to do this more effectively, I think the whole financial world will be benefiting a lot more from blockchain, especially in emerging markets as well, right? Where people just don't have access to bank accounts, credit cards, and just have a harder time getting loans, like all these different things, where we can change a lot of which directly impacts GDP and people's livelihoods. Like I said, gaming is interesting. And what I'm also missing right now is something like, like an aggregator in a blockchain world, what I think will be super relevant, right? I'm talking about a Google for metaverse, right? Or a Bloomberg for crypto. There's a lot of companies who try to do something like this, but they all lack certain areas. But the basics of infrastructure is still not there yet, right? So we're betting highly on sort of making it more secure, more easy. And we're looking at gaming more from a studio perspective rather than from an individual company perspective, right? Because I think that's how the industry will turn out down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited to see how the P2E space will end up. From the games that I've seen, to be honest with you, like you've mentioned, a lack of quality in the products, a lack of time in the products. I really do think a lot of the P2E games they're really not comparable to anything that like big game studios have put out. I don't think any of the games are really as enthralling as like Call of Duty or FIFA or anything like that. They don't have that hold on the gamer's attention. But I'm really excited to see how that's going to evolve and how that quality is going to improve over time, and how we can still put that P2E component in some kind of way into those games. That's going to be really exciting. I don't have any more questions for you, Tobias. If you would like to share something on your end, please feel free to do so. Is there anything you would like to tell anyone?
No, I'd love to, have some closing thoughts, so to say. I think, first of all, to all investors out there, I think it's really important to provide more than just capital down the road. I think we all need to use our expertise and be available to companies and reply and be active. To all entrepreneurs, especially if you're building great products, be wise in sort of how you choose your capital and who you choose your capital from, because it is a very long-term relationship. And I've seen a lot of challenges where incentives, where expectations weren't aligned. And you need to find the investor which is, obviously helpful, but at the same time, more importantly, understands your thought processes and goals. Because as soon as money involved, there are a lot of cases that people get greedy, incentives are not aligned, and then this can also break the business, even though the business in itself would go well. In the blockchain space, anyone who is out there building interesting products, more than happy to have a chat, even if it's not for investment, for advice, or maybe we can make introductions to other funds if it doesn't fit our needs properly. And always happy to just also have a normal conversation and just making friends, connections, and so on and so forth. So thanks, Jad, for having me here, and always happy to get reached out if anyone has any questions, and appreciate your time.
Of course, man. It was my pleasure. Thank you for answering all the questions. I'm sure everyone's going to find it super valuable, and hopefully I'll catch you soon.